who we are as an organization, my name is John Reardon. We've been working with PowerSchool back through the Penimation days. So I don't know how long you guys are familiar with eSchool and with eFinance Plus, but they were originated by a company called Penimation, acquired by SunGard, and then ultimately acquired by PowerSchool. So as an organization, we go way back with those products that are in use at every Arkansas school district. Other than a lot of airline miles and hotel points, the past 20 years of working with K-12 school districts has given us a pretty good perspective about what challenges they face in document management. So how do I manage all the documents that you mentioned earlier, report cards and transcripts and IEPs and so on and so forth. And what's interesting about that is that we have come to understand that every school district is on a paperless journey. But what's really interesting about it is that some don't know it, right? So I have yet to come into a school district where they said, you know what, we're going to tear down this classroom and we're going to add filing cabinets because we're going to create a lot more paper this year than we were last year. In other words, no school district has a bulleted agenda item to increase paper use, right? It's all going the opposite direction. But when I say you're on a paperless journey, that doesn't necessarily mean you're moving forward either with a conscious directive or with a strategic initiative involved. So your step of the paperless journey may be, I've got an individual in our records office who's just starting to scan documents, or we just bought a multifunction device and now I'm starting to scan some documents in there and I'm starting to email those out instead of just using paper forms. So it could be an individual, and it may be you or that individual, either by choice or because someone said, hey, you solved this problem. But what ends up happening is becomes to get a critical mass of those type of individuals, and then they move to a department level. And so all of a sudden now we have a departmental initiative to start getting rid of paper. And it's at that point in time that a representative of that department will be in a meeting like this. Because someone finally says, you know what, I'm tired of the filing cabinets, or we've got to reclaim some space, we're out of room, I need you to find a document management solution for us. And then that department will go paperless, and then the next thing you know, they're in a meeting with another representative from another department. Oh, you're using this? Okay, great, we want to use that too. And then you have 2 or 3 departments, and then generally there becomes a district-wide initiative. And I bring this up because it's important for you to recognize where you are in that paperless journey and where your district is. And the reason being is that the requirements for technology, the requirements for training, the requirements for getting people on board is going to be different based upon where you are in that journey. Okay? We kind of mention it as a crawl, walk, run, fly approach, right? And the reason being is that in each of these areas, in each of these steps in the journey, so to speak, you're going to face increasing challenges, but you're also going to have an increasing reliance upon technology. And if you start on this paperless journey without the correct vision of where you're going to end up, we see districts with 2 and 3 different document management solutions. You know, human resources is using something, finance is using something, and student services is using something. And obviously, someone in IT is generally the person that waves their hand and says, oh my gosh, we got to get out of this, right? We need something that can handle the district approach. So based upon where you are determines the challenges you'll face, and it also determines who needs to be involved in the paperless conversation. Now, one of the funny thing is, inside of Arkansas districts especially, you're going to see a lot of different applications, and at least 4 of these up here are PowerSchool applications. So I don't know if your district is using one of them or all of them, but everyone's using eSchool Plus and eFinance Plus. You may be using Talent Ed as an applicant tracking solution, and eventually, it's my understanding that all the districts will be using PowerSchool registration as well. Is anyone in here a pilot district for registration? Okay, fantastic. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about how we manage that as well. But what's also interesting is that all of these different applications have some aspect of document management. So if you're using PowerSchool registration, when parents upload files for electronic registration, they're going to be stored in PowerSchool registration. If you're using Talent Ed for applicant tracking, it has the ability to capture documents. eSchool and eFinance have the attachment functionality where you can upload documents to those applications. But the problem that we see is, just like you mentioned, I've got documents now all over the place. And if I don't have access to that specific application, I don't have access to the underlying documents. So what we like to do is consolidate the documents into Content 360 into a single repository where we will organize those documents. We can lock them down. We can also set retention schedules against them, right? So in the beginning of your paperless journey, no one cares about retention because you just got started. But retention schedules are set by the state, and your district can get in a lot of trouble if you get rid of documents too early, or you don't hold them long enough. We also, though, want to provide access to those documents directly through your PowerSchool applications. So just because we're holding the documents doesn't mean that we're going to make you go into our system to find them, right? Your teachers are in Teacher Access Center. Your administrators are in eSchool Plus. If they want to see a document, they can go directly to that student, just click the button, and they'll see the records there. Okay? So it's a centralized document management approach, and it provides a lot of value for the school districts we work with. I won't go into this too much, but I want to show quickly how we integrate with PowerSchool registration. This, if it's not on your radar screen now, it will be in the future. So this is where we're moving kind of a little bit from the philosophical discussion directly into, okay, how do we integrate with specific PowerSchool products? So with PowerSchool registration, when parents are registering, they're going to be submitting documents during the registration process. It's generally 3 documents. It's generally the birth certificate, proof of residency, and transcripts if they're available. So when parents submit those documents, they'll also be filling out a lot of information. So the registration forms and the enrollment forms. The data from those forms is going to go directly into eSchool, okay? Especially for new student registration. And it's actually a bi-directional, because if you're re-registering, you're going to be using information in eSchool to validate back into PowerSchool registration. But the documents will then flow into Content 360. And the way that works is inside of PowerSchool registration, they can download forms, and this gives us the documents in a delimited file, in a file structure, and we can then import those into our software. And so we have the category of the document, so we know what it is, and then we have the student ID as well, so that allows us to categorize the document and link it to the correct student inside of eSchool. So this is specifically for PowerSchool registration. It may not be something that your district is using now, but Arkansas has a statewide license for PowerSchool registration. There's some pilot districts that are going live with it now. There will be much broader use we expect over the coming months and years as other districts start to roll into electronic registration. Any questions about that? Okay. Once we have access to the documents directly from any screen inside eSchool, so I'm on Lindsay Abert's student summary screen inside of eSchool. When I double click or control click on that screen, I'm going to be presented with a list of all the documents that are related to Lindsay. Okay? Now, this list of documents is only documents that I have access to. So if I'm a nurse, I might have a different list of documents than if I'm a teacher, than if I'm an administrator. So we're securing the documents down to that individual screen level. So I could go in and then view the report card. Now the report card is a document that's generated by eSchool. Whereas if I go and look maybe the proof of residency document, that's something that was uploaded by the parent through PowerSchool registration. Okay? Any questions about that process? Okay. The same search functionality works inside of Teacher Access Center. So if I go into the student drawer, I find Lindsay Abert's record. Again, I can double click on that record and then see the same documents as well. So we're not just, this is functionality that is rolled out to all users who need access to documents inside the district. Even if we go on to the human resources side, the finance side, we're in Finance Plus, same double-click functionality. In this case, we're bringing up human resources documents or finance documents instead of student documents, right? So in this example, I can go and I can click on the I-9, for example. Any questions about that process? Okay. Now, if I'm a more advanced user, we can, and this is generally going to be the case if I'm like an administrator, or I need to go in and I need to access documents that are maybe across campuses. They're not just related to an individual student. We do have a full search capability where I can go in and say, okay, well, let me go in and this is kind of my dashboard view inside of Content 360 where I can put my most common searches and I can create a little tab for them so I can quickly access records if I'm doing it a lot. You'll notice though this is a very, very intuitive, very easy to use interface. If I highlight over anything, I get a visual clue for what that functionality is. But I can go in and just say, okay, show me all of the students, and I'm just looking at this. I can use date ranges, I can use student ID, first name, last name, any bit of extra information that I want to be able to find about a document or use to retrieve a document, I can do that. And so here I'm seeing my results. They're organized by student ID. And so I can find the student ID I'm looking for, limit the student ID I'm looking for, and I can see all the documents that are related to Mary Dalton or Jeannie Haas or whoever I'm looking for. So if I pull up Mary Dalton's birth certificate, and I realize this may be very difficult to see in the back, I have a lot of other options on what I can do with that. So I can see the keywords. These are all of the index values that we're using to categorize that document. And by the way, I'll show you in a minute, these index values were not something I had to type in. Okay? So because we have an integration with eSchool, I just have to type in the student ID and we will populate all the other fields that I want to use to categorize this document from eSchool data. I'll show you that in just a minute. I can also go in, and this is something that I'll mention, I can add notes to this document if I want to, but I can also see the document history. And this is a very, very granular view into what has happened with that document since it was created and entered into Content 360. It's so granular that it says that, the manager, that's who I'm logged in as, just viewed the keywords about 30 seconds ago. So when I viewed the keywords, it actually noted and added that record to that document. Okay, so once the documents are inside of Content 360, we've got them, right? We know exactly what's going to happen, and we can then provide access to the people who need them at the appropriate amount of time. We are also going to set retention schedules on these documents. So I know that student records. I'll tell you a funny, kind of an anecdotal story about how long I've been in this. So for a long time, I couldn't figure out why when student records, I started talking about document retention and no one cared. Then I started realizing that, in most states, student records have a retention schedule greater than almost 100 years. So not only is this not that person's problem, it's not even that person's successor or that person's successor problem, right? But student records do have retention schedules. Now, human resources and finance are different stories. Their retention schedules are much less. So, it is possible that if you're, the finance director, that documents that you're scanning will have an end of life while you're still employed with the district. Okay. Any questions about the document viewing, document retrieval? Okay. Again, it's pretty straightforward stuff. One thing that is nice also, and this especially from a student record perspective, we can actually organize documents in a folder structure. So I can go in and I can say, okay, here's all the documents, and I can just do a quick, nice, easy view for an individual student. What's cool about this view, and I realize it's hard to see, but the student name number is over to the left. Highlighting that shows me the list of documents we have, but we can also highlight missing documents. So there are documents that are required by the state that you're required to store for every student. Wouldn't it be nice to have a list of, okay, well, here's all the documents that I'm missing for this campus, for this student in this campus, and that's a report that we can run out of this, on a monthly or semester basis, however you'd like to run that. And so that lets me know where I need to increase my focus for capturing documents. Any questions so far?
Can you pull up individual students to find that missing document?
No, that's what I don't have it configured on this machine, but we can run a report across any campus ID district-wide that will give you that list.
And you can just run a report of anybody that's missing any document.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yep. And so that then lets me know, okay, hey, I need to call this administrator. They need to get another document. Now, with PowerSchool registration, I'll be very candid. One of the cool things about that product, and it's nothing we do, is that I have the ability to do quality control over the documents that are submitted. So when a parent submits a document, I can make sure it's actually proof of residency and not a picture of their cat. Or it's not an expired driver's license. So there's some interaction that can happen there. So I will increase my quality of documents and hopefully reduce the amount of missing documents. But right now, most school districts have very little visibility into what they're missing, right? Because it's all in paper. And no one's going to sit through 3,000 folders and say, do I have this, and this. If somehow it's missed during the registration process, then it's likely never going to be caught. When we start moving into a digital environment, I now have visibility into that entire process. All right, one other thing I'll mention, and I talked about it earlier, but let's show how we're getting documents into the system. So at a very high level, jump back over here. So anything created by my PowerSchool application, so anything that I'm printing out of either eFinance Plus or eSchool Plus is automatically captured and stored inside Content 360. All right, so if I run report cards, those are automatically captured, they're indexed, they're attached to the correct student at the moment I print them. Okay, if I print W-2s, same thing. All right, so anything that's being generated out of my transcripts by my PowerSchool applications, we can capture, categorize, and store automatically. No printing and scanning, right? If I have other documents that are coming through PowerSchool registration, we've talked about those are automatically uploaded, no printing and scanning. But there's always going to be the inevitable document that a parent drops off. There's always going to be a parent who doesn't have access to a scanner or a smartphone during the registration process. So you're going to have paper somewhere in the district. And generally, that will run through a scanning process. Jump back to, and obviously I don't have a scanner attached to my computer here, so we're gonna assume that those documents have been scanned. They're somewhere either on my desktop or maybe it was an email I received, right? So there's a lot more email as a default document management system going on in K-12 school districts as well. But in some form or fashion, I've gotten this document. I've been able to drop it into a multifunction device down the hall. It's scanned, and now it's waiting for me to get it into Content 360. So I can just go to my import button here. I'm going to browse out to find. We'll just add, maybe it's we'll just add a birth certificate for. And I can set this up to where I automatically have these items selected, but it's basically, I'm gonna say it's a student information, it's a birth certificate, and I could start to just go through and type in all this information down here. Or, as I mentioned earlier, I can just use a single key piece of information. And when I tab off of Content 360, it's automatically going to fill in the rest of these fields with data out of either eFinance Plus or eSchool. All right, so I only have to key in a single piece of information, and I've now captured this document and stored it by 10 or 12 different index values. Any questions about that?
Sorry.
No, that's no worries.
Is this something that the statewide is going to, or something that
That's a great question. Okay, so is it statewide or is it something that is on a district by district basis? We're in communication with the state, but as of right now, they have left this up to. This is my personal opinion. This is not, this is nothing that I've heard. I think the PowerSchool registration initiative is kind of where their focus is right now. We're hoping to get this more district-wide for a couple of reasons, but it's not there yet. Right now, I'm sorry, we're hoping to get it statewide. Right now, it's a district by. Yes, it's a. Right, it's a district by district decision at this point. Yep. Now, the vision that we have, because there's some real benefits for having this be a statewide solution. One is that if I codify these documents, and I'll mention this because it's applicable in two different places. One is that during the PowerSchool registration process, and you may have missed this when I showed it earlier. Hopefully, this is not regressing too much, but it's something that we're very interested in, so I'll bring it up. So PowerSchool registration ultimately generates something that looks like this, right? It's a student ID, and it has the name of the content type. Well, if we were able to implement this statewide, and we could come up with some measure of codification for those content types, if I had a student moving from District A to District B, right, I could transfer those records with a push of a button. Because all that information, Fort Smith would look the same as Little Rock, right? Because all the content types are the same, they have the same name, and it was something that we talked about at the state level, saying, hey, look, you may not go with us. I don't know if you, but what I would recommend is try to keep your districts labeling these things the same way. Come up with a taxonomy that's common throughout Arkansas, and that way, if in the future we ever want to go to a more statewide approach for document management, it makes it really, really, really easy for students just to transfer from one district to another. Yeah, great question. And there's a lot of other benefits there as well, because you could really centralize the capture process. You can standardize some of the forms that the districts are using, and that would make the intake of those forms automatic. Because if I know exactly what an expense reimbursement form looks like, no matter which district it's from, I can capture that information on that form instantly. So, but great question. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a huge tangent there.
What about my school info and how does that have an effect? This has an effect on my school. Basically, goes hand in hand with each school. Plus.
Yes. So my school info goes into eSchool Plus.
Yeah, they go kind of hand in hand. So
Okay. Is my school an application? I'm not.
my school info it provides basically the same documents as eSchool Plus, and I'm really trying to figure out how they go hand in hand.
Okay. Great. So how does this go hand in hand with eSchool, or how does my school info go hand in hand with eSchool? Part of what, which company?
Your company is part of eSchool Plus or.
We're a partner of eSchool. We're another third-party product, yes. So, and this is another thing that would benefit us from a statewide perspective. All of the data that I'm talking about integrating with eSchool, it's not truly integrated. And this is something that all the third-party products that are not hosted by the state run into. We basically have to download the information from eSchool, and then that's how we run queries against it. We would look.
So you don't have like an API?
We do, and we're working on that. The challenge we run into with the API is that not all of the fields are present that our campuses would like to index documents by. Yep. So from that perspective, we have to run it's more of a 1990s approach for data integration. But yeah, and that's a great question as far as how the data operates together. PowerSchool will not give anyone that's hosted access into the database, only through the API. And we can access it through the API, and if all the fields are there, that's our preferred method. If they're not, then we're kind of left with just doing what we need to do. Yep. And it's in you that becomes relevant right here, because this is when I need access to the eSchool data and when I'm using PowerSchool registration to bring those documents over.
I might be able to answer his question.
Certainly.
eSchool, my school info has all the data from the student, but this is holding the actual documents, like the birth certificate, and the registration paper, and you won't see that paper over in my school info. You just see the data. This holds the actual documents. Am I saying that correct?
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
So it has nothing to do with like the discipline data?
Not the data itself, but if there's any documents associated with discipline, they could be stored in our software. So, discipline records, forms that are sent home to parents that need to be scanned and signed, those could come back into our software. Now, what's interesting is if there is a screen associated with My School Info, we could take the data off of that screen and attach documents to it. So if you're pulling up a student in My School Info, and I don't know that application, but our integration screens, our ability to attach documents to screens are not limited to eSchool or eFinance. Really, if it's any Windows web or even green screen application, we can attach documents to it.
So you're basically talking about the documents like
Nursing is a huge place for us.
Basically everything in the handbook.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely.
I got you.
Yep, absolutely.
I got you.
Yeah, I didn't even discuss the handbook aspect of it, but absolutely, that's a whole other area for us. Anything that's required, immunization records, athletic forms, we've even gone to done concussion forms, right? So those are uploaded, so we can as long as it's paper or if it's a document, we can manage it.
So while it's not district-wide yet, but in theory, once it is, and it's in Dardanelle, and we get a kid in from Dardanelle, then we would be able to have access to their records like that? Not have to chase the parents down?
Not have to chase the parents down. Literally, it would just, and where this also becomes, when we have school districts that are kind of I'm not saying towards the end of the journey, but when they're really in the middle of it, the end of a marking period or the transition from elementary to middle to high school, there's no file transfer. Like literally nothing happens. It's a non-event because we just recognize that they're now in a different school district in eSchool, and and when they're rostered in eSchool, when I have access to that student in eSchool, I now have access to all their records. Does that make sense? So we may change the campus that they're assigned to, but that's it. So there's no file transfer, there's no mass migration, there's no parents having to go to a new location to drop off information, all of that happens kind of behind the scenes, if you will. So it's really cool when all this comes together. Okay, y'all are asking some awesome questions. Thank you very much, and please keep it up. I want to talk about just a little bit, one other aspect of forms and, one other aspect of going paperless. And this is when when your school district is really bought into the paperless approach. It doesn't have to be in the entire district, but maybe just a department. We start talking about, how do I stop paper creation before it starts? Like, school districts they run on forms. I mean, y'all know this, right? If I want to keep the lights on in the gymnasium past 3 o'clock, there's a form I fill out. If I want to keep the air conditioning running, in the theater past a certain hour, there's a form I got to fill out. If I go to any one of your websites and click, under human resources, there's at least a dozen forms. Some of them are PDF, some of them are Excel, some of them were created, in 1982, some of them are more recent. But there's forms for everything. The problem with them now, even if they start electronic with most districts, is that they go straight from electronic to print. And now I've got a piece of paper I've got to deal with, right? And we're a document management company, but we hate scanning. If we can get rid of the scanning process, because that's another manual step. Scanners are hard to maintain. They break sometimes. Sometimes I scan the backwards, scan it upside down and backwards. And so if I can keep that information electronic, I want to do so. So with Content 360, we do have a full eForms solution to where I can take even existing forms, scan them in, and convert them into electronic forms. Or we have a complete graphical form designer that I can go in and create new forms there if I need to. I can surface those forms in an email. I can post them on a website to be filled out. So what we're trying to do, and we're trying to encourage districts to go to a more paperless overall environment, right, by embracing electronic forms. This is a quick example of some of the things we can do from a forms perspective. Radnor Township is just outside of Philadelphia. This is a form that they filled out whenever there was a change to a student information. You may not have this form, but I just want to show you some of the things we can do, right? So the first thing we can do that makes the form creation process easy, I can use the same student ID to pre-populate all the information that I have about that student on the form. So this kind of avoids what I call the doctor's office problem, where you go to a new doctor's office and the first thing you do is fill out your name, address, date of birth, social security number 15 times. I'm like, can I fill this out once? You guys type it in and then you have it, right? No, I've got to fill it on the top of every form. So I fill out one piece of information. I can use that data to complete multiple forms or multiple sections on forms. So check boxes, things like drop-down lists, even repeating sections, and then ultimately even signing of forms as well is all possible. I can attach other documents to these forms. So if I send home something to a parent and I'm requesting them to resubmit other forms, they can do that and send it back to us. And oh, by the way, when they upload the other forms, because it's attached to one of my electronic forms, I don't have to scan it or index it. It's automatically attached as the correct content type. Now, again, that won't solve the, hey, they sent me a picture of their cat problem, but it does give me the ability to ingest that information very quickly.
That's if your parents have access to electronics.
That's exactly right. Yep.
So we,
Now, if they don't, we'll talk about that in a second. I'm sorry.
oh, sorry. So if we, like all of our handbook pages that we have to do every year in parent, so if the parent types in, like the student's name, because, they don't remember that student ID number.
Right.
They type, it'll automatically fill in on every one of those pages if they fill out one page.
If they fill out one piece of information, we can pre-populate it on every page. Absolutely.
Or that parent, we don't have to do anything.
No. The parent will do it on their tablet if they want to.
And how will the parents access that?
They can access it So, and that's, you're into kind of where this gets to be a little more difficult. So we can attach the form to an email and broadcast out to parents if we want to. There's some nuances there from a security perspective, because we also have a full portal that parents can log into. What we can't do, what everyone asks, is why don't you just attach the hack, the home access code? We cannot do that yet. We're working with PowerSchool feverishly to try and get them to open that up to us.
Can you attach it to like our website or parents?
Yes, yes. So we do have the ability to attach it to a website, or we have a portal module that we can use to have parents log into. They can see all of their forms, they can click them, fill them out, complete them, and so on and so forth there. The key for the whole thing, in order for us to be able to do that, is we have to know who the parent has to authenticate at some point. If we're going to be making any sort of personal information available to them, which would be included student ID. Right? So we have to know that the parent can log into the portal. We have to know who they are.
So they get to it, make a change.
Mm-hmm.
How does it get changed into eSchool?
We can't write that information back into eSchool at this point. Now, we can give it back to you in a form where you can upload it to eSchool, but they will not let us write data directly back into eSchool. So the API may solve that. We're working with them on that as well. What we can do, though, and forms tend to be like potato chips. You never have just one. We can then launch workflow. So when I receive a form into my district, Content 360 has a full workflow interface, which allows me to go through and see exactly what I need to be working on. And I won't go into all the details here, but I will just show you a couple highlights. So inside workflow, I see a list of all the documents or all the tasks that are assigned to me. I can see the document that's driving the workflow, so the electronic form. I can also see related documents. So maybe these are the documents that were uploaded with that form or were submitted with that form. Okay. And it allows me then to go through and perform whatever actions I need to perform. So do I need to update a system? Do I need to look at another application? Do I need just to say that I've seen this document and approve it and move it on to the next step in the process? So I can quickly go through and say, okay, yeah, here's the related documents. Yeah, I realize that there's a discipline problem here. I'm going to route this to someone in the administration building and then let it go from there. So a couple of the things that are happening with this, and again, if we're talking about the crawl, walk, run on my paperless journey, this is where we're getting towards the end, right? Because this is when not only am I not having to scan at all, I'm not even routing paper anymore. But this is where we see every district ending up in their paperless journey. Because what ends up happening inevitably is I have a department scanning and going paperless. Then I have the entire district going paperless. Then I have people saying, well, geez, why am I still having to go into Content 360, retrieving documents and emailing them to someone? Right? Because as soon as I email it, I've automatically created at least 10 copies of that same document. So why not just route it electronically? And the problem also is when I email to someone, I don't know if they're on vacation, I don't know if they've got it, I don't know who they sent it to, right? So workflow is kind of the final evolution, if you will, or the final step in the paperless journey. It's not the start. So if right now you're still struggling with filing cabinets, workflow will be a subsequent conversation. But it isn't. What the nice thing about workflow is that, remember the audit trail I showed you earlier? I can tell exactly where every document is in our organization at any point in time. Also, the nice thing about workflow is it's tied directly into notifications. So if a document is it's stuck in a certain step, we can start emailing people saying, hey, you got to take action on this, you got to take action on this, you got to take action on this. And it kind of eliminates have you seen my expense report? Have you seen my time off request? Have you seen my student transfer request? All the phone calls that accompany the process.